Hi guys, I'm Chad from EPI. Today we're going to run through installing a clutch kit on the Arctic Cat. It's also pretty much the same process for Suzuki, so we'll kind of run through it real fast and give you a quick idea of how everything works and how to change most of the stuff in here. Most of the kits that we would have today, we're going to put a sport utility clutch kit in this machine. It'll have the roller housings, 8 of those. It'll have 8 roller weights. It'll have the wet clutch springs. It'll come with a bolt to help you change the bolt or help you change the belt, and then also a secondary clutch spring. Some of the kits will vary between the different models and brands and stuff, but this is pretty much your standard kit. Also has detailed instructions that walk you through it, and we'll also be installing an EPI severe duty belt when we get to the end of it. So from there, we're going to dig into it and see. Alright guys, basically we're going to start out here. We remove the footrest and the brake lever just to get easier access to everything. Again, we're going to use this video for the Arctic Cats and Suzuki, so everything's going to be pretty relative the same between all the different brands, but just a quick overview of everything. We took out most of the bolts just to speed everything up for you. Basically, once you get the clutch cover bolts off, just kind of keep track of what bolt goes where. Sometimes they'll be different sizes in different locations, so just keep track of that. We pull the bolts out. Should be able to pull the cover right off. There'll be a gasket on the back side of this. Normally on this cover you can normally replace them, or normally reuse them without replacing them without an issue. This one is playing in the mud a little bit, so there's a lot of dirt and dust and belt dust and everything else in here, so when we put it all back together we want to clean it up really good. Same thing with the clutches. But once you get this off, to set it off to the side, there'll be an aluminum bracket or a guard on here. Usually it's 3 to 4 bolts, and it's just a matter of unbolting those, pulling it off. Again, when you put everything back together, clean it up good. The other thing to watch on for these is there'll usually be a bearing and a seal in here. Just make sure they're in good shape, not tore up. If it's got a bearing in it, make sure that's turning free, it's not locking up or anything. So when you put it back together, it's good to go. Once you get that off, just put it off the side. And then you got your clutches. You got your primary clutch, which is on the motor. It'll either be called the primary clutch or drive clutch. And then you have your bigger clutch, which is on the transmission, which is either called the secondary clutch or the driven clutch. Pretty much once you get them here, some models will have a nut and a washer here, some will have bolts. These actually have bolts on these. They're already loose, so we're just going to take them off. And when we're doing that, just kind of keep a hand on this. Sometimes with the belt and stuff, they'll pop out just to hold all the parts and pieces. This one has a bolt and then a collar on here or a fancy washer. Again, that's going to vary between models, but just pay attention how it comes on and off so you know which way to put it back on. Once you get that part done, you want to put your hands on the back side of this front half of the clutch. Put your thumbs here that hold the clutch together and just slide it out. When you pull it off, there's a shaft right here. Sometimes this will actually stay on there. Doesn't matter either way. You know, if it comes off, just set it off the side because you're going to need to take it off by the time you do the rest of the clutch anyways. But you just want to pull this off, set it off in a clean area. In a little bit we'll throw it on the bench and go through how to change all the parts in that. Same thing on the secondary clutch. I'll use this just to speed things up. This is your secondary clutch again. Just buzz the bolt off. And then pull it off. The one thing to watch is sometimes there'll be some grease in the shaft, and so when you pull the belt on and off, just make sure there's no grease on it, or once you're done, make sure there's no grease in the belt because that's going to cause slippage for you. But it's easy to just kind of squeeze the belt a little bit. That'll force the belt away from the shaft and just pull it right off. It's not pressed on there or anything. You can just pull it off and set it down on a clean spot. And pretty much now we got the clutches off. Once we get going in the future, or farther down the road here, we can pull this off. It's just the back half of the clutch, nothing major to it, and we'll just pull that off, so it's off now. I'll set it down, and then we'll bring these clutches over the bench and start tearing them apart. Alright, we got the primary clutch over here on the bench. Basically we just pull off the machine, set on a nice clean piece of paper towel or a clean work surface, so that way it's good to go. Pretty simple parts and pieces, nothing major to it. When you get it here set on the bench, pull this inner plate off. there'll be 4 plastic pieces here. Just make sure they're in good shape. Sometimes they might fall off, you just got to slide them back on. Just pull that out and set it aside. When you get that off, you'll be able to see the 8 roller weights. They'll be in there. Just pull them off, set them off to the side. There's 2 different styles of weights. Some of them you can reuse the outer housing, some of them you can't. So it's just a matter of seeing which ones you have. Usually with an EPI clutch kit, if you need new roller housings, they'll send that with the kit, so it's an easy, easy switch over. But basically, when you get those out, you'll have basically an empty clutch. And what you want to do is, this will normally have belt build up and dirt and dust and mud sometimes, and just normal debris in there. Just take an air hose, blow it out really good. If it's still dirty, take and wipe it down with a brake cleaner or contact cleaner, just to get all the valleys, especially the valleys, clean, because that's where the rollers need rolling and out. So get that cleaned up. Another thing you want to do is clean this side of the clutch. This one was a little bit dirty. We touched it up a little bit fast, or a little bit earlier, just to speed things up. But what you want to do is, if it's just a little bit dirty, all you got to do is spray some brake cleaner on a rag and just wipe it down, and that normally takes care of most of it. If it's got a lot of belt glazing, or if it's really shiny, that'll have the belt glazing and belt dust and everything just kind of gets glazed onto there. What you want to do is just take a Scotch-Brite like this, or a real light sandpaper, and just give it a little scuff job all the way up. Start from the outside, go towards the center, and just kind of work it all the way around. You don't want to normally go like this. Just go like this and go all the way around. That'll get all that stuff off there. You don't want to put any deep grooves or anything in there. When you're done with that, again, just spray it down with brake cleaner. Spray a little bit on a rag and just wipe it all down. The cleaner you can keep this side of the clutch, the better it's going to grip the clutch, or the better it's going to grip the belt, and the better it's going to perform. Along with the inside of the clutch, the cleaner everything stays, the more it's going to operate properly. It's going to be less maintenance costs in the long run for you, and be a lot better for you. Once you got it all good and clean, then it's going to be a matter of installing the weights. Our kit's going to have the 8 housings and the 8 weights. Normally they come separated. You just got to push them in. It's pretty easy, simple to process. Here's your new roller housing. All the EPI ones will have a lip on one side, so the weight will only go in one way. And you can either do it like this. Some people squeeze them in a vise, but just lay it over the weight and just push down on it with your hand. Pretty simple. And take a socket, fits in there, and it's good to go as long as the bottom's out. If for some reason your kit is reusing the stock roller housings, it's pretty simple too. All you'd have to do is find a larger socket that the weight will fit into. Make sure there's no lips to hold it in, and if there is, make sure you're pushing it the right direction. And just take a socket like this. Again, you can do this in the vise or hit it a couple times with a hammer. It normally comes out pretty easy. And that'll separate the roller housing and the roller weight, and then you're good to go. One other thing to watch when you're in here inspecting it, especially if we're using the old roller housings, is make sure they're good shape, they're not flat spotted, they're not melted, there's no cracks in them. If they are, you're going to want to replace them because they need to roll freely and nicely to work. On this kit, we've got brand new roller housings, brand new weights. Some of our kits will have split weights, which means that it'll have 4 of one weight and 4 of another weight. So what we do then, let me just get this one back together real fast, is that, this one's going to be 1 set of grams, this one's going to be another. The easy way I like to do is just put an X on it, that way it's easy to keep track of. These 4 are the same, and just put them in there, and you want to put them in there every other one in the clutch. That way it keeps it balanced and everything working properly. And as long as you put them in every other valley all the way around, it's easy to double check, you're good to go. Then put your other one in. That's pretty much it. You throw the inner plate in it. This is clean, ready to rock and roll. You just set it off the side until you get done to your final assembly. Alright, we're done with the primary clutch. Now we're going to start with the secondary clutch or driven clutch. Again, not too major of a job. As long as you got the right tools, it's not too bad. This is going to vary a little bit between the size and color of springs between a couple of the different sizes, brands, and models, but same basic principle of how to do it. It's going to have a lock ring on here. The factory will tell you to use a span wrench. If you have that, that's the better way to go. But a lot of people will just use a punch to loosen this up and turn around. What else you'll want to do is, this is a pretty stout spring that gets compressed in here, so you want some type of clutch compression tool. At EPI we make one, it's the CCT 510 clutch compression tool. Makes it pretty easy and safe to do it without getting hurt on it. Basically what you want to do is to slide the clutch down on there. This one's going to sit a little bit bumpy because it's got the tab of the spring up, but that's fine. And you just tighten this collar down on there. You tighten it down a little bit. And then you take your punch and just loosen it up. It'll just spin around. I loosen this one up just to speed things up for the camera. Usually in most cases, once you get it going, it turns off pretty easy. Once you get that off, all you got to do is back this nut off, and it'll slowly let the spring come out of the clutch nice and safely, so it doesn't shoot through the ceiling of your garage or your shop or come up and hit you in the face. Alright, on this one thing to pay attention to is this collar. It'll come out of here. You can see how dirty the spring was from all the buildup and everything in there. But remember where the spring pokes through, there's a couple different holes. Most of them it'll come through this square hole here. But then also notice that these flat spots in here, those will line up with the part of the clutch in here. So when you get everything together, as the spring gets compressed, it's going to twist a little bit. You'll have to preload that to get those lined up before you can tighten everything up. And we'll kind of show you that real fast. You just pull this collar off. Grab the new spring that come in the kit. One difference between some of the different models in machines is some of them will have adjustable holes or multiple holes to adjust the spring tension in. This one only has one hole. Usually if you have adjustable holes, the clutch kit instructions will tell you which ones to put it in, and it does give you some more options for adjustment if you want to down the road. But you basically just put the spring tab in, make sure it's inserted all the way into the hole of the clutch. Slide the collar on, make sure it's in the right hole, and then put your lock ring on and tighten everything down. Just make sure you're not pinching any fingers or anything, especially if you're rigging up your own tool or anything. Just be careful because there is a lot of spring tension there and it can go flying out. Another thing you want to do is when you have this apart, it's a good time to clean everything out. It doesn't make a huge difference with the spring and everything in and out. If you have the spring out, it'll allow you to move the clutch a little bit more and allow you to clean it more. But clean the inside and the outside of the clutch. Same thing if it's really glazed over, get emery cloth in there best you can to kind of try to clean it up, or Scotch-Brite or something, and then use contact brake cleaner and wipe it down. And this one, it's going to be kind of hard to see on camera here, but basically what you want to do is just turn it about half, usually it's eighth of a turn or so to turn it. You can get it going. Oops, I gotta tighten it up just a little bit here. Back it off so I can see. Lost track of where my flat spots were in the clutch. There we go. You just got to turn it. And then Sometimes it takes a little bit of patience and effort just to spin it right, but once you get it, sometimes it helps if you got another person there to turn the spring. Some springs will be a spring where you have to turn them and compress them. Some of them are just compressed straight down and you don't have to worry about it. This one's a lot stiffer than your stock one, so it's going to take a little bit more effort. Sometimes if you need to, you can get a punch or a screwdriver on this little deal and that'll help you twist it the way you need it to too. But we'll try to do it without that. Just try to get it go here. Of course, I'm trying to do it in a video, so it's being a little bit more pain than it normally would be. But if you tighten it up before you get it lined up, you can damage that spring collar, so you don't want to do that. Once you get it in there, it's pretty much in there, and then it's just a matter of getting your nut on there and tightening that up. Usually you can kind of thread that on there most of the way. If not, just kind of work it around. Once you get that tightened up, you're good to go. You can pull the clutch out of the holder and set it off the side, and then we'll get in the rest of the clutch. Alright, now we're back to the four-wheeler. Basically we got, this is where your primary clutch was, this is where your secondary clutch was. Now we're going to change the wet clutch, and to get to that we got to pull the rest of the housing off. Again, this is going to vary a little bit between the different brands and styles of machine and stuff, but it's just a matter of removing the back plate here. Sometimes that's going to be metal, sometimes it's going to be plastic. I got the bolts out except for this one here. The other thing you want to do is, some of them will have vent hoses connected on the front and rear. Sometimes you might want to take those loose first, but you just pull this off. This one has gaskets on the back of it. Again, normally these are reusable until you get to the engine side of it. So you can just set that off to the side. There's a vent hose in the back here that we took off, a vent hose here that we took off, and then once you get to this point, even before you pull this first part off, it's a good idea to drain the engine oil. Once you get into this part, you're going to be inside the motor, and you're going to have oil leak out. So you want to drain your engine oil, get that drained and dripping while you're doing this, and it works out pretty good time-wise. Once you get to this point here, it's just a matter of taking out, again, all the bolts. Really important on this one, just to make sure you pay attention to what bolts go where and where they come through, because they'll a lot of times will be different lengths in different locations. Then it's just a matter of unbolting these real fast. I think there's only one or two left in here right now. And when you pull this apart, even with the oil drain, you're always going to have a little bit of oil drip out. So what we like to do is just shove a paper towel or a rag or something in there just to help catch it. Otherwise, you know, get caught up in your shields and protectors underneath and just leak oil all over the place. But once you get it out, everything's loose. There's a gasket back here. If your machine's fairly new, you might be able to reuse it without wrecking it. Otherwise, if it's had some time on it, probably a good idea just to order that gasket and have it fresh for you when you put it back together. We normally put that part number for the gasket that you need inside the clutch kit instructions. And the other thing to watch is, now everything's loose. When you go to pull this off, there's a one-way bearing behind here. Sometimes it's going to stay in the housing, sometimes it'll stay in the clutch. Every once in a while it might fall down. The biggest thing is just make sure you're keeping track of where it is and how it is. But we'll see if we can wiggle this off. Sometimes you got to turn the shaft a little bit or wiggle it up and down, and it'll come off. And here's basically what it looks like on the back side of it. I'll set this off to the side. And this is going to be your wet clutch right here. This is the one-way bearing I was telling you about. Most of them will either have a green dot or a colored dot, or it'll say outside on them. When you put everything back together, this is really important, is that this bearing is facing the right way. When you put it back on the machine, whether you put it on the clutch like this or in the housing, you want to make sure you can read it where it says outside. If you put it on the wrong way, then you'll start the machine, it'll either take off on you or it'll start up and quit right away, and you'll have to tear everything apart again, and you could damage that bearing. So the biggest thing is just make sure you pay attention when you're doing that. If it comes off with the housing, that's fine, just leave it in there. If it comes off like this, just set it off. Make sure you keep it nice and clean. Set it off to the side. And then you'll get to this nut here. On most machines, not all, so just double check with your instructions or double check with your manufacturer. This will normally be a left-hand threaded nut on there, which usually means you got to do it opposite of what you normally would to take a nut or bolt off. Once you get that loose, you just unthread it. We loosen this one just to speed it up for the camera. And a lot of times there's a nut and a washer in there. This one does have a washer in there. Sometimes it'll let me sneak it out, sometimes it won't. Now sometimes what you'll see on some Suzukis and a few other Articats, this will be kind of pressed on there and you'll need a tool to pop it off. This is a normal tool that most of your Articat and Suzuki dealers would have. Basically it's just like a dent puller or a slide hammer. You thread this hub into there, thread that into it, and then just give it a couple of tugs and it'll pop right off. Most of the other Articats are just on there. Once you take that nut on there, you can just grab a hold on your hands. You might have to tap it with a rubber hammer or something, and it just slides right off. It's on the spline shaft, so it's just a matter of pulling it off. Once you get it off, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to have your wet clutch springs down there. That's what we're going to end up changing, and show you how to do that. We'll bring it over to the bench and show you how to do that. All right, now we're going to start working on the wet clutch. Basically what I did is I put a C-clamp and a vise. That's the way I like to do it. You can pretty much do it however you want. Basically what there is there's, on this particular model, there's 5 below posts that have a little clip on them, and you want to remove that clip, and these are kind of spring-loaded plates, so you need something to kind of squeeze down on them. Some people use a plier, I like to use a clamp, especially if you're doing it with one person, makes it pretty easy. Easiest way I found is just put a screwdriver in the clamp and just kind of give it a little push. I like to hold it with a paper towel in case it goes flying across the garage. You don't have to spend an hour trying to find it. It'll normally either just fall off or drop down into the clutch. And you just kind of give it a little love tap and it comes off. That one fell in there. And then you just take this off. And then there's 3 plates. There's a top, a middle one, and then the bottom one. And you just set them off to the side, and then you'll see the clutch spring or the clutch shoes, and these are the wet clutch springs that we're going to change. It's not too bad to get those off. What I normally do is just take a exhaust spring puller tool or spring tool. You can use needle nose pliers or needle nose vice grip, works the same too. But most of the time you just got to pull up on them, and they'll come loose. Usually once you get one, they start coming a little bit easier. It's going to be a little bit hard to see here, but they're all popped loose. And there's actually 2 ways of getting the springs on. This is the way I like to do it. The easiest way, I think, is you just pull the shoes off, take the spring off, and then just keep them in the same order as you're going. That way they stay consistent to how they were on there. There's a clip I took off earlier. And then you'll end up with the shoes off with the springs off. And then these are our springs that we'd use. Usually our springs are going to be a little bit heavier duty than the stock ones, both in wire diameter size and overall size. So they're going to be a little bit harder to put on than what the stock ones are because they're stiffer. But basically what you want to do is, I like to put the inside one in first, and you just kind of hook it in there. Sometimes you got to turn it just right and it'll pop in. One thing, if you're having an issue, especially once you get to the end and they're all getting on there, these springs can go either way. They both have a hook on them. If you're having an issue and fighting it and can't get them, sometimes if you take the spring off and switch around the other way, or if you grab springs and get the hard one on first and then go back around, and that'll help you. But basically what you end up doing is you take that spring, you just hook it into there like that, and just kind of work your way all the way around. Usually it's not too bad until you get to the last one. That's where it gets a little trickier. And what these springs will do is these will change your initial stall speed, your engagement. Usually with our kits we'll raise them up a couple hundred. With this style clutch, it still stays nice and smooth and everything. It just gives you some more bottom end and more power on the bottom end as far as response, and more initial takeoff right on the whole shot. This is where it gets tricky. You get the third one in, or the last one in there, and then you usually got to kind of just wiggle it around just enough because they're all tied together, and then they'll just kind of do that. Sometimes you mess up, it makes a big mess. And it's just a matter, it takes some patience, you just got to start over. Usually it's just a matter of one falls apart on me, but of course I'm doing it for the video, so it's going to be harder. Alright. So again, start over with the last one. A lot of times you just got to tilt it just right, and then it'll kind of pop itself in there. Just like that. And you got them. Sometimes it takes longer than that, so it takes some patience, but then what you want to do is just kind of hold it together and just slide these back onto the posts here. And they should line up, and just kind of, might just got to wiggle them down a little bit. And when you wiggle them down, just kind of work them down, kind of the same amount all the way through. And they'll go down to a certain point, and then they'll stop. And what you have to do, as you notice, there's a little gap right in there. When everything's assembled correctly, there won't be any gap there. What you'll see is there's a little groove right here, and if you can see that little pin right there, that has to drop down in the groove. And basically the easy way I found to do it is just take a screwdriver and just stick it in between the two, move it down, and even a lot of times if you just take another screwdriver and tap it, and just kind of go down. Sometimes you can just do it like this with your finger, just wiggle it back and forth and push down with your finger, and that's usually enough to get it going. Once you get it started, it will normally go right in there. If it doesn't, you can go around, tap them with a screwdriver once they're started. Now they should be pretty much flat in there, and that's the way you want to be them. And you can see where the posts are sticking through. These two need to come in a little bit farther yet, but you can basically see what's going on there. If you don't have those on all the way, it's not going to allow you to get the clip on there, or for some reason if you do get the clip on there, it's not going to work right when you get in the clutch. Once those are all the way on there, it's just a matter of putting your plates back on. Just lining up the posts, and then we'll move back over to our C-clamp. You see the posts aren't sticking out there, that's because there's spring tension on there. Once you get this in the C-clamp, that's going to compress them down and squeeze it for you. And then it's just a matter of taking your clip, get that started on there. I like to use the pliers, just catch the edge. And push that on there. Just make sure it's all the way on there, it's seated all on 3 points. Repeat that for the other posts on there, and once you're done with that, you pull it out, and your wet clutch will be done. Alright, we were just on the bench, we got everything assembled in the wet clutch, so now it's just pretty much just a matter of putting everything back together. When you do this, you know, obviously you're always going to be draining, clean up any oil, excess oil and stuff like that. Just slide this on the shaft. It's going to be a spline shaft. Throw on the nut and the washer that goes on there. And remember, most of the time they're going to be left thread, so it's going to be opposite of your normal nut and bolt that you take off. I'm just going to quick buzz this on with an impact. You're supposed to torque it to factory specs, but just for speed of the video, we're going to do it real fast like this. And then once that's on, I like to stick the bearing on the actual clutch itself. You can actually stick it in the housing too. Sometimes some machines work better than others, but the biggest thing is just remember it should say outside on it. or dot or something, however it came off. Just make sure it goes on the right way, otherwise you'll end up taking the whole thing apart again. So it's just a matter of sliding that on there, going through, and then just put the housing back on. Make sure you got your new gasket on there. And then you might have to wiggle the shaft. You might have to move the vent hose and stuff too. But that's just a matter of just kind of working it back on there. Careful not to wreck the gasket or anything. Oops. Like I said, careful not to wreck the gasket or anything. And then slide her back on there. Make sure she seats. Sometimes like this, it'll bind up on that, you might have the vent hose that might be putting a little tension on it. It might not be sitting flat on the bearing. And then it'll just pop on like it just did there. And that's just a matter of putting all the bolts in, torquing the factory specs, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, we've got everything back on the machine. We put this back plastic housing on. Again, sometimes it might be plastic, sometimes it might be aluminum. Just make sure the gasket's good. We sealed that up. We put the vent hoses on the front and rear. Sometimes they might be on top or bottom, but usually all machines will have that. So we put those on, put all the bolts in just to save some time for you, and then we slid this on. This is the back half of the clutch. We cleaned it really good, just like you would on the other half of the clutch, and it slides on there. The key part on this is make sure it's on the splines and all the way on. And then what you're going to want to do is take this shaft that goes on the primary clutch. Just slide that all the way on. Again, make sure it's on there as far as you can get it. And then what I like to do is to grab your secondary clutch or the German clutch, pop that on, and then put your nut on there or your bolt in there, whichever one it might have. And I'll just impact this on real fast just so we can show you guys. Remember, just always torque the factory spec. Do that real fast. And then this is the stock belt that came off it. It was getting a little worn, a little dirty, a little beat up. We're going to replace it with the EPI severe duty belt. And basically what you want to do is just pull it out of the package, throw it up in there. And anytime you put on a belt, whether it's an EPI belt or whoever's, is you always want to put it so you can read the letters. And as long as it's on the machine and you can read the letters from left to right, that's how you want to do it. Some belts will have an arrow, some have both. Either way, the biggest thing is whenever you take a belt off, just make sure you put it on the same direction it came off. That way it's broken that way, it's broken that direction. Another thing is when you get a brand new belt, you want to be nice to it for the first 20-25 miles. Just kind of vary speeds, don't go all out, don't go in the deep mud hole right away or high end speeds. Just kind of vary the speeds, vary the time, just to get it heat cycled once or twice, and your belt's going to last you a lot longer. The other key important thing is when you're doing all this, especially after putting the wet clutch in, putting the oil in, that's another thing we did is we put the oil back in the machine. Make sure you go and clean your hands so everything's good and clean and dry so you're not getting oil and grease all over your clutches or on your belt, because that's just going to cause you slippage and cause you issues. Once you got your belt on here, some machines you can actually just put it on there, some you won't. What I like to do is just put the belt on there. Sometimes you got to fight the fenders with plastic a little bit more than others. And what we'll do in a lot of our kits, we'll send a little bolt like something like this, and that's made to go in. Sometimes there'll be 1, 2, or 3 holes in here, and you can actually thread this bolt in there. If there's not a bolt in the kit, a lot of times we'll say you can use a clutch cover bolt. If we've found that works, just the same, save you the time and effort, you can just grab one of those and thread it in there. I always start them by hand, and as you tighten that up, that's going to open the clutch up to allow the belt to be looser on there. And you buzz that in there real fast. It normally doesn't thread in hard or anything like that. It's just going to force that spring open and open up the clutch. The biggest thing is just remember to take it out when you're done with the job. It's just going to go like that. It's going to allow you to get the clutch on, the belt on and over the shaft. Now sometimes on some machines it's easier to actually pull this back off, and with this open, you can put it back on and off the shaft. And I can show you that too. If you have the bolt in there, that's going to give you extra slack to get that belt on and off easily. Just tighten it back up. Alright. Once you got that part done, you want to leave that bolt in there. No matter how you took it on and off, you're going to want to open that clutch up so you have slack in here. What that does is allows this belt to move off of here and allows you to get your primary clutch all the way on. You can see a little bit of spline sticking out of the clutch here. When you grab your primary clutch and get everything bolted on, you're still going to want a little bit of that spline showing. When you grab your primary clutch, here's what we put together earlier. Again, I'll show you. The rollers are in there. They're all in their valleys. You want to keep them in there. So the best way to do that is just have it sitting flat, put your inner plate in, let it slide all the way down, and what I always tell people is put your thumbs on this, put it on that, and squeeze it together so it can't move at all. Once you do that, you slide it on, and then try to line up the splines. And what will happen is unless you have that belt loose, you can only get it so far. If you actually take and squeeze your belt, it's going to allow you to pop it on a little bit farther. Sometimes you might need to rotate it a little bit, but as you do that, you see there's about 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch of splines that stick out once I do that. And that's usually what you want sticking out, and that's usually on most models going to be the right way. And then put your washer. Sometimes it's a washer like that, sometimes it's just a flat washer, and your bolt on. The key thing is always to hold this inner plate in from moving out when you're moving back and forth on this, and always have a finger or two on the back side just to squeeze them together. What will happen is if you don't, it'll let one of those rollers fall into place, and it almost keeps the clutch locked in high gear. So if you go out and ride the machine and it seems like it's slipping or just doesn't have the bottom end take off until you get up to 15-20 miles per hour and then it kind of seems normal, there's a good chance that one of those rollers might have fell out of place. And it can do that just from when you're putting on the belt or putting on the bolt and stuff. I always just kind of keep my hand on it until I get the bolt tight, and once you're there, it's usually pretty safe. If you have somebody helping you, it's always a good idea just to have them hold it there, squeeze everything tight until you can buzz it tight and then torque it right to the factory specs. Again, we're just using the impact to speed things up for you. And that's pretty much it. Once you get to that point, I'm going to back out this bolt and reset the clutches. If you were just doing a belt change on your machine, like if you just went through, cleaned all your clutches and just going to change your belt, same basic process. The easiest way is to pull this off, put your belt on, and then put this inner part back on. Once you get going, you might have to put your machine in a different gear, but if you spin your clutches before you go, that'll get your belt reset so everything's set right and proper. So when you take off, it's not going to slip or be in the wrong gear ratio and stuff. Then once you're done with that, it's just a matter of putting on this shield. Again, on this part, make sure that the bearing and the seal, whatever might be in this part is good to go, and then bolt it up. And put your bolts in, you should be good to go. Alright guys, as you can see, we got the clutch cover bolted up, so pretty much that finishes up all the clutch stuff. Now it's just a matter of getting the footrest on and putting the seat on and all the other stuff. Just remember to double check the oil once you get it running up and moving. And when you get everything together, just go out and ride it. Take a slow ride, make sure everything seems right. Make sure everything feels good as far as back shift and throttle response whenever you're on and off the gas, things like that. If you have any questions on that, feel free to call us. And if it's our kit, we can help you do, sort the issues out, hopefully. If you have any questions on EPI clutch kits and which kit was the right one for your riding and what type of riding you're doing, give us a call. Just call EPI at 218-829-6036 and ask for the EPI tech department, or ask for the tech department, and we'll help you out the best we can. Thanks.